Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivada Dari Jaya Gopi Jana Balava Girivada Dari Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Unatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balaba Girivada Dari Jaya Gopi Jana Balaba Girivada Dari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Shodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Thank you. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Priya Vajakacharya Astu Tada Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Priya Vajakacharya Astu Tada Sata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Brinda Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki. Sri Janmastami Mahotsava Ki. By Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. So today, since we normally do Bhagavad Gita, I just picked I picked a very popular verse that probably most of you know, but it talks about Krishna's appearance. It's the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 9. And I'll read if you want to chant it with me, you can. You all know this text. Janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tadvataha tvaktva deham punar janma naiti mam eti sorjuna. So the translation is, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. And then Prabhupada says in the very first line of this purport, it says, the Lord's descent from his transcendental abode is already explained in 6th verse. So we flip over to verse number 6, and we'll see what Prabhupada says there. I can get to verse 6. So in verse 6, Prabhupada says, although I am unborn, this is Krishna speaking to Arjuna, he says, although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all living entities, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So the reason I picked the Janma Karma verse was that it says that one who understands the transcendental nature of my appearance. And so we know that tomorrow is Janmashtami, so it's Krishna's it's appearance day. And then it also says, and my activities, which means the pastimes. So I was thinking that these next 2 to 3 months are going to be amazing because there's so many festivals, so many wonderful festivals that I know sometimes as devotees we may get kind of bogged down in maybe our job or whatever, and we think we need to go to India and get our batteries recharged like we charge our phone up or something, But these next few months will give all of us an opportunity to really recharge our batteries and really plug into either some service or extra chanting or reading or doing deity service or whatever. So, we got tomorrow's Janmashtami, the next day is Srila Prabhupada's appearance day, and then in September is Srimati Radharani's appearance day, and then we had Lord Vamana Dev's appearance day, and then we have Bhakti Vinod Thakur's appearance day, and then in October, we've got the month of Damodar. So we've got so many wonderful, festivals and activities coming up. So we should all just try our best to try to plug into, try to do some extra service or try to, just try to maybe recharge our batteries if we need to. So when Krishna appears in his original transcendental form, all the Vishnu avatars enter into his body. And it means like the Leela avatars, the Yuga avatars, the Manvantara avatars, Guna avatars, they all enter into Krishna's body. And therefore, when we worship Krishna, we're actually worshiping all the different expansions of the absolute truth. And they're accepting Krishna, accepting us through worship through Krishna, because Krishna he's like the sum total of all the expansions. But when he comes in his original transcendental form, he comes, well, it says for 3 reasons. He comes, what are those 3 reasons? Who knows? Exactly. So to protect the devotees and to kill the demons and to reestablish religious principles. But any of his incarnations could actually come and kill the demons. So really he comes for the pleasure of his devotees. He comes to give us these pastimes. And so tonight I thought I would just tell a few pastimes so we can all kind of, I know Mother Prabhupada Priya gave class Saturday, and she gave a wonderful class leading up to Krishna's appearance. And so tomorrow night, whoever would be speaking will be speaking about his appearance. So I thought I'd just maybe talk about a few different pastimes and just show you how important pastimes are. There's one pastime with Srimati Radharani where Srimati Radharani is standing in the forest and she's just weeping and crying. And Lalita and Vishaka walk up and they see her crying, and they go to her and they say, Srimati Radharani, why are you crying so much? And she turns to Vishaka and she says, you of all people should know, should ask that question. And Vishaka thinks, what did I do? What could I have done to Radharani? And Srimati Radharani says, I should just probably hang myself from one of these vines. And when she says that, Lalita and Vishaka almost faint. And so then Vishaka tells her, Radharani, I'm only here to serve you. I would give my life for you. So what is it that I have done that has caused you so much pain? And she said, well, you painted this picture the other day of this boy, this blue boy with a turban on and a peacock feather in this hat. And I was looking at that picture, and that boy came out of the picture and hugged me. And I immediately fell in love with this boy. And she says, so therefore I can't forget him. I'm just thinking about him all the time. And so they're thinking, well, they tell her, well, so you saw a picture and you fell in love. Why are you crying so much? And she said, well, that's not all of it. She said, the other day I was listening to these cowherd boys go by, and I heard one of them playing a flute. And she said, I heard this flute, and it went right through my ears into my heart. And she said, when I heard that flute music, I immediately fell in love with that man. And then she said, then I heard the name Krishna. And she said, when I heard the name Krishna, she said, I could not get it out of my heart. She said, I just couldn't stop thinking of the word Krishna. She said, so I fell in love with that person too. So she said, the reason I'm crying is because I'm in love with 3 different men, and I'm supposed to be so chaste. And they started, Lalita and Vishaka just started laughing. And Srimati Radharani said, how can you laugh? I'm so feeling so bad that I'm not chaste. And they said, Radharani, that's the same person. That's Krishna. So she's showing us three different ways that we can actually increase our love for Krishna. One is through the picture, through worshiping the form of the Lord. The second one is by chanting Hare Krishna. That's the Yuga Dharma for this age, so chanting Hare Krishna. And the third one is she heard Krishna's flute, so pastimes, by hearing Krishna's pastimes, because we all have, we have a Kali Yuga memory. So in early ages, people they hear something, remember it right away. But I know the other day I was walking around looking for my phone everywhere, and it was in my back pocket the whole time, and I'm looking everywhere and thinking, God, what a memory. So that's our memory. So by hearing these pastimes, hopefully we can actually remember them. I know when I'm chanting sometimes, I like to meditate on Krishna's pastimes. It keeps my mind from going all the different places that mind likes to go. So these pastimes are very important for us to hear, and so we're going to try to talk about a few of them tonight. So Srila Sanatana Goswami says, he said, you can offer 10 million cows in charity. You can live by the Yamuna for 1,000,000 years. You can offer mountains of gold to the Brahmins, but these are not 1/100th the spiritual value of chanting and remembering Krishna's holy name. So that's how important these pastimes are of remembering Krishna. So once Bhumi she became a cow, and she went to Lord Brahma, and she was complaining about how the demons were ruling the earth, like Kamsa. She was talking especially about Kamsa. And so she went to Lord Brahma, and she told Lord Brahma about what was happening, and then so he said, let's go to see the Lord Kshirodakshaya Vishnu. Let's go to Svetadweep. And so they went there, and then so the Vishnu said, well, why don't we go to see actually Krishna and ask Krishna to come down? So if you remember the story of Vamana Day, which is coming up also, his appearance day, if you remember what happened when he took his second step. Does anybody remember? He punched a hole in the universe. So what happened? Then the Ganga started coming down. So this Kshirodakshaya Vishnu said, why don't we all get in the Ganga? Instead of going downstream, we'll go upstream. And so they did. And I don't know if they got into a raft or how they did it, but they went in the Ganga, they went through the heavenly planets, they went through everything, and they got to Goloka Vrindavan. And they were stopped there by a gopi, and she was guarding the gate, and she said, so who are you, and why are you here? And they said, well, we're the devas from the universe. And she said, well, which universe? And they said, well, what are you talking about? There's only one universe. And she said, no, there's millions of universes. Which one are you from? And so they explained to her, and so they got to see Krishna. And then Krishna told them, he said, don't worry. He said, you incarnate to help me, and I'll come to earth, and I'll take care of this Kamsa and all these demons. So that's kind of how, and then Krishna goes to Srimati Radharani, and he says, I'm going to go to earth. Would you go with me? And she says, my Lord, wherever you go, I'll go also. She said, but what about Govardhan Hill? What about Yamuna? What about Vrindavan Forest? And Krishna said, no, don't worry, we'll just take them all with us. So they, Krishna came and took all, and we'll hear that more in Govardhan, with the Govardhan class. So I guess the first pastime I would like to tell is, I don't think when we had Lord Balaram's appearance day just last Monday, I don't think they told the story of Dhanakasura. So it's such an amazing story, I would like to tell that. So one time Krishna, cowherd boys, from appearance to 3, Krishna would stay home. And then from 3 till 5, he would herd the calves with the cowherd boys. And then from 6 years old on, he would herd the cows. So this was like just a few days after he and the cowherd boys started herding the cows. And so they came past this forest called Talavan Forest. And there's kind of a palm tree that grows there, and it has this fruit called the tall fruit. And has anybody ever had tall fruit? Okay. So it's very nice, very delicious. So it had such a wonderful aroma that the wind was blowing it toward the boys, and the boys were just, cowherd boys, they would take their lunch, but usually before it was even lunchtime, they'd already have eaten their lunch because they'd snack all the time and playing. And so they were feeling hungry, and so they approached Krishna and Balaram, and they asked him, could you please go and get us some of these fruits? And it sounds like, they were maybe lusting, but actually what they really wanted was they wanted these fruits so they could offer them to Krishna and Balaram. And they knew if they asked them and, said, can you go get those fruits so we could offer them to you? They probably wouldn't do it. They said, don't worry about it. But they said, if you go and get them for us, Krishna is definitely going to go because he wants to please his devotees. So they did that, and Balaram says, well, you boys always talk about how great you are in wrestling. Why don't you, they were telling me there's this big demon there called Danakasura. And what kind of demon is Danakasura? He's a donkey, yeah. And so they say, well, there was this demon there, and no one can go in and eat that fruit, even though Danakasura wouldn't eat the fruit himself. He was just, he was so envious that he didn't want anybody else to have him. I think the only one that would go and get him was Kamsa's men. They could go, but no one else. So Balaram said, hey, you guys talk about how strong you are. Why don't you just go get him, and defeat this demon? And then the boys said, Balaram, Krishna has killed so many demons, and he's actually your younger brother, but what have you done? How many demons have you killed? And they said, you just talk about how strong you are in wrestling, but we don't see that you kill any of the demons. So this kind of hurt Balaram's feelings a little bit. So Balaram said, okay, let's go. So they go into Talavan forest, and Krishna and the cowherd boys, they kind of stay back. And there's a reason Krishna stayed back, is because, does anyone know who Danakasura was in his past life, in one of his past lives? He was actually the great-grandson of, Prahlad Maharaj, exactly. He was a great-grandson of Prahlad Maharaj. And then he was also, in his last life, he was the son of Bali. So Krishna had made a promise, as Lord Nrsingadev, he made a promise to Prahlad Maharaj that he wouldn't kill any of his relatives. So since Danakasura was one of the relatives, Krishna wasn't going to fight this demon or kill him. So anyway, Balaram goes in and he grabs one of the trees and he just starts shaking it. And he's shaking it so hard that makes some of the trees fall down, and it's like an earthquake. And so it wakes up Danakasura. And so he wakes up and he roars really loud. Anybody know how a donkey roars? How does a donkey roar? Can you do a donkey roar? I can't either, so we won't do one. But anyway, he roars really loud, and he comes rushing at Balaram. And when he does, Balaram takes him, and Balaram throws him, like it said, like several kilometers, and he lands on his head. So it knocks him out for a little while. And then he gets up and he says, wow, this white-skinned boy, he's pretty tough. He said, maybe I should try this dark-skinned boy here. So he runs at Krishna, and Krishna takes him and he does the same thing. He throws him like, several kilometers. And so then he says, wow, this boy's strong too. Maybe I should try these boys here. They're probably weaker. So he starts trying to, run at the cowherd boys. But then instead, Krishna steps in, and Danakasura, he makes this huge form with big horns, and so he runs up and he does something amazing. He swallows Krishna. And when he swallowed Krishna, the cowherd boys were thinking, oh my God, what happened, And then what happens is Krishna is like a hot iron in his throat, and he throws Krishna back up. And so then he takes Krishna up in the sky, and I was reading, Mathuranath Maharaj said that he went 1,000,000 kilometers into the sky. I mean, that's a long way. But he went way up in the sky, and when he did, Krishna punched him. And when he punched him, he fell down. Danakasura fell to the ground again, and he fell unconscious. So he thought, wow, this blue boy, he's tough also. Let me try these other boys. So he runs at the cowherd boys, and the cows scatter, and so he runs at Sridham. And Sridham, what does he carry? He carries a stick. So when he went to Sridham hits him right on the head and just almost knocks him out. And then another one of the cowherd boys comes up and he kicks him right in the face. And so the cowherd boys really get into it then, you know. And then, so a couple of them come up and they take Denakasura and they pick him up and they smash him on the ground. And then there was one little boy, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to get in on the action. All he had was a rubber ball. So he took his rubber ball and just smacks Denakasura with his rubber ball. So Denakasura's thinking, wow. He said, these boys are just as tough as these other ones, so let me try the white boy one more time. So this time he runs at Balaram, and Balaram catches him by his hind legs, and he twirls him around with such centrifugal force that Denakasura loses his life. And then he throws him in a tree. And when he landed in the tree, it knocked other trees down. And so about that time, all these other, we call them donkey demons or ass demons, they all come running out. And when they do, Krishna and Balaram start just killing all of them and throwing them in trees. So when it's all over, it looks like the whole Talavan forest is like a rainbow with different colored donkeys in the trees. And so the boys, by that time, you know, there was a lot of blood, a lot of demons laying around. So they didn't take the fruit. They just said, okay, we're not gonna eat the fruit. So that was like kind of a pastime where Krishna and Balaram kind of participated in it, but Balaram was the one that ended up killing Denakasura. So just a little bit about Krishna's pastimes as a butter thief. We know Krishna is very known as Makan Chor, the butter thief. So when Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda, when they were he was ruling Gokul, everybody was happy. Everybody was very pleased. He was such a great king and everything. But there was one problem that was on pretty much everybody's mind, especially Nanda Maharaj and Mother Yashoda. What was that problem in the kingdom? Does anybody know? They couldn't have a child. They tried, and they had tried mantras. They tried yogis coming. They tried everything, but they just could not have a child. So Mother Yashoda was very worried, but Nanda Maharaj, he wasn't worried. He said, I don't want just a child. I want the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so Mother Yashoda said, well, don't you think maybe you're aiming your sights a little high, you know, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead? And he said, no, I see in a dream that I know that you know that the Lord is going to appear. And so then one night they both had the same dream, and it was Krishna came to them as beautiful blue Krishna, smiling face, and told them that he would soon appear in the womb of Mother Yashoda. So they both woke up and they both told each other this story. And so we know that, well, we'll hear tomorrow night for Janmashtami exactly how Krishna appeared. It's a whole beautiful story. And so I guess Mother Prabhupada Priya maybe is giving class tomorrow night, yeah. So she'll be telling you all that story. Yeah, at 10 o'clock? Okay. So Krishna as a butter thief. Once Krishna, when he was very little, he could crawl, but he could barely walk. Mother Yashoda was looking for him, and she didn't know where he was. So she went into where they stored the butter, and Krishna had his hand in the butter pot. And he was talking to someone, and she looked and thought, who is he talking to? So he saw his reflection in a pillar there, and he thought it was another boy. And he told the boy, he said, hey, if you don't tell anybody, I won't tell anybody, and we can both steal this butter, you know. And then he happened to see Mother Yashoda, and as soon as he saw Mother Yashoda, he said, Mother Yashoda, this boy is stealing butter, and I'm trying to stop him, you know. And so Mother Yashoda, she just laughs, and she said, but Krishna, why do you have your hand in the butter pot? And he had butter all over his mouth, and he said, well, you know, those bangles you put on my wrist, they were burning my wrist, and I had to cool them off somehow, so the only way I could do it was stick it in the butter pot. And so Krishna, you know, he gets away. Mother Yashoda, all he's got to do is smile at her, and he gets away with anything. So that was one of his first pastimes as a butter thief. And then another time, Mother Yashoda couldn't understand why Krishna would go and steal from other the gopis, but that was Krishna's favorite thing to do. It says the whole time Krishna was in Vrindavan, even when he got older, he was always a butter thief. He always he liked stealing butter. So one time, Upananda, who was Nanda Maharaj's elder brother, he came or his wife came, Padmavati came, and she told Mother Yashoda, she said, your son keeps coming to our house and he keeps breaking our pots. He keeps causing so many problems with stealing butter. You have to control him somehow. He's the son of a king, and so it's got to be embarrassing for Nanda Maharaj, so you have to control him. And she said, well, you catch him. If you catch him and bring him to me, she said, then I'll really chastise him. So what she did was she set up all these ropes, like ropes going everywhere, and they had bells on them. So if you tried to climb through those ropes, it's definitely going to ring a bell. And so she thought, well, I got him now because I got a trap set for him. And so sure enough, the next day, that evening, Krishna comes and the cowherd boys, and they're sneaking around. And so Krishna goes in and he sees all these ropes and this net type of thing. And so he tells the bells, he said, whatever you do, don't ring when I come through here. He said, don't ring at all. So they agree. So Krishna climbs his way through the ropes, and he gets up on all this makeshift stand, and he has a little pole that has a point on it, and he breaks the pot. And when he broke the pot, butter fell down, and he started to eat the butter. And what happened when he ate the butter? What happens when you do an offering? What do? You always ring the bell. So the bell started ringing. And so Krishna was saying, why did you ring? And they said, well, you're eating butter. We have to ring. So Mother Padmavati comes running in, and the boys, all the other boys, they take off, and they leave Krishna by himself because he's still up on the stand, So she grabs him, and she starts taking him to Mother Yashoda, and he was begging her, please don't take him to my mother. She's going to punish me. And she said, no, I'm taking you to your mother. So she goes in, and Krishna puts her sari over his head so Mother Yashoda can't see him. And so she said, I caught him. You said to bring him here, and so I've caught him now, and you need to punish him. So she said, well, show me his face. So she pulls her sari down, and it's not Krishna, it's her son. Krishna changed himself into her son. And Mother Yashoda says, I think you're mistaken. This is your son that you brought me. And she looks down, and she sees it's her son, and she's like so embarrassed, and she didn't know what to do, And so she just, speechless, she just grabs Krishna, and they walk around the corner. And as soon as they get around the corner, Krishna changes himself back into Krishna. And he looks at her, and he said, if you ever do this to me again, next time I'm going to change into your husband. So word got around that, if you do this to Krishna, if you try to catch him, he's gonna pull a trick on you. So pretty much after that, he had free reign to go into people's houses and steal all he wanted, So since we're kind of calling this the Kaliya Krishna Janmashtami, I thought I would tell the story about Kaliya. And so we know that Kaliya was a serpent with how many heads? Do you know how many heads Kaliya had? About 100. He had about 100 heads, yeah. So just to give you kind of a little background on how Kaliya happened to be in the Yamuna, I'll kind of tell you a little background. So Garuda, who's Lord Vishnu's carrier, he would go to an island called Nagalaya, and he would eat the snakes there, and he would also kill a bunch of snakes that he really didn't eat, so he would just indiscriminately kill snakes. Birds do that. I remember one time I was walking around this lake, and I saw an eagle come down, and he swooped down into the lake, and he came out, and he had a snake in his claws. So it's just natural for a bird to kill snakes. So they complained to, there's Vasuki, who was the king of the snakes. He complained to Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma made a deal with Garuda that, okay, every half-moon night, we'll make an offering to you. You will offer a snake, and you get to eat the snake, and then you don't kill any other snakes. So they kind of came to a deal there. And so Garuda agreed. But then Kaliya, he was very puffed up. I mean, he had 100 hoods. He was big, serpent. So he said, why do we let Krishna eat these? He said, I'm just going to eat them myself. So Kaliya started eating the offerings. And as soon as Garuda heard this, he flew there, and he started fighting with Kaliya. And so Kaliya, he didn't stand a chance against Garuda because Garuda is very huge. And so Garuda was slamming him with his wings. And so Kalia had to leave. And so he went to the Yamuna there because there was a lake under the Yamuna. And he went there because there was a yogi that lived there called Subari Muni. And he was friends with the fish, and he was underwater meditating. And so one time he had told Garuda, Garuda would go to the Yamuna, and he would also get fish and eat them. And so he told Garuda, don't come here anymore and eat any fish. And so Garuda just grabbed one of the big fish and flew off. And so Subari Muni got so angry with him, he cursed him and said, if you ever come to this lake again, I'll kill you. And so Garuda really didn't have to honor, his curse because he's Garuda, he's Vishnu's carrier, but he did. So the only one that really knew this curse was Kalia. And so Kalia went to the Yamuna, and that's where he took shelter. And so one day, Krishna would always go out with, he would always pretty much be with Balaram, because Mother Yashoda would always tell Balaram, now you protect him on this side, and Sridham, you protect him on this side. But this day, he didn't go with Krishna when he went to took the cows to the Yamuna. And so when they got there, the cows and the cowherd boys, they were very thirsty, so they started drinking out of the Yamuna. And what happened? They all really supposedly died. It was like they died, the cows and the cowherd boys. And if you looked around, everything around that lake was dead. And he said even if a bird flew over, it was so poisonous that the bird would die. So then Krishna comes, and he just glances over the boys, and they all wake up. And they go, wow, what happened? It was like we died, but now we're back alive again. And so then Krishna goes over to this Kadamba tree, and they say there's two reasons maybe why this Kadamba tree didn't die from the poison. One of it was that Garuda knew that this pastime was going to happen, and he sprinkled some like magic nectar on there. And the other one was that as soon as Krishna's feet touched that tree, it came back alive. So Krishna, before he would fight, he would usually tighten his belt and do it like over his arms. And so he did that, and he climbed on the tree, and he jumped in the water. And it said he made such a splash that it was like waves just went up on the banks of the Yamuna. And so Krishna was splashing around, and Kalia heard him. And so Kalia comes up, and he grabs Krishna. And at the same time he grabbed Krishna, word had gotten out to the villagers that Krishna was there without Balaram, and that something was happening. They saw omens in the sky, and they could read these omens that something bad has happened. So they all rushed to the Yamuna, but the only one that wasn't worried was Balaram, because Balaram, he knew it was Krishna. What's going to, he can't hurt Krishna. So Mother Yashoda, she wants to run into the Yamuna. She wants to save Krishna because Kalia has him in his coils, and he's holding him there. He has him there for like 2 hours. He's holding Krishna in his coils. And so everybody's about to faint. They don't know what to do, and Balaram is stopping everybody. They want to run in and help Krishna. So finally Krishna releases himself, and he starts to dance around on the hoods of Kalia. And as he's doing this, Kalia starts to throw up like poison, and he's throwing up all this poison, and as he's doing that, actually he's becoming more and more purified because Krishna's jumping around on his different hoods. So he's trying to catch Krishna and catch him, but he can't catch Krishna. And finally he comes to the point where he's thrown up all his poison, and he comes to realize that this is Krishna, that's the Supreme Personality. And so also his wives, he has many wives, and they're, what are the wives' names called? Nagapatnis, Nagapatnis. So they all come up, and they're offering their prayers to Krishna, and they offer all these beautiful prayers to Krishna. And then Kalia himself, he starts to offer prayers to Krishna, and really like apologizing, I guess, and just saying, what can I do? I'm a demon, and this is what demons do, So Krishna tells him, okay, you leave this lake and don't ever come here again. And he says, don't worry about Garuda, because as soon as Garuda sees that he had my footprints will remain on your hoods. As soon as he sees that, he'll leave you alone. So Kalia left, and he said, you can take all your wives, take all your possessions, and you can leave. So Kalia did that. And I don't know, this is like a conspiracy theory, but some people say that the Loch Ness Monster, when they see him, that maybe that was Kalia, and maybe, who knows, maybe it was, I don't know. So talking about Garuda, this is a pastime with Garuda. When he was, if you remember, when Lord Ramachandra was fighting, and he got tied up with a snake noose. I guess it was Kamsa that threw the, who was it? Ravana, yeah. Indrajit? Yeah, Indrajit. So Indrajit threw this snake noose at Lord Ramachandra, and it tied him up. And Lord Ramachandra couldn't get loose. So he had to call on Garuda to come and get him loose. So Garuda came, and he of course killed the snake, and Lord Ramachandra was free. So ever since then, Garuda was always had that little bit of doubt in his mind: is Lord Ramachandra really the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Because if he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, why couldn't he release himself? Why did I have to come and release him? So he always had this doubt. So then he heard that Krishna was performing his pastimes in Vrindavan, so he came down and he hid behind like some bushes. And he was watching Krishna and the cowherd boys, and he saw Krishna. He'd be wrestling with the cowherd boys, and then he would get defeated. The boys would defeat him. And then next thing you know, he kills this huge demon. And so Garuda could understand that Krishna is just showing his, human-like pastimes, but he's actually, when he comes, and if he's a little baby, he comes with his full potencies. He's even as baby Krishna, he killed Putana. He has his full potencies. So Garuda felt so bad that he had this in his mind for so long. So he went to Krishna, and he offered his obeisances, and he asked Krishna, please forgive me. And Krishna, of course, forgave him. And so then Krishna got on Garuda's back, and they flew around Vrindavan. And all the cowherd boys saw them flying around. And so then the argument started afterwards. Was that Krishna or was that Vishnu? So some of the cowherd boys says, no, that was Krishna. He must be Narayan. And the other boys said, no, that was Lord Vishnu just flying around. So Krishna hears them talking, and so what does he do? He turns into his four-armed Vishnu form, and he gets on Sridham's back, and Sridham turns into Garuda. And so they start flying around, and the boys see this, and they're going, wow, Krishna is amazing. And what's really amazing is that when they saw him the first time, they thought, well, he must be Lord Narayan. But when they saw him, and he turned into Lord Vishnu, and then Sridham turned into Garuda, they just thought it was amazing. It was just Krishna. It's just something Krishna did, and they didn't see him as a supreme personality or anything. It was just Krishna, their friend, that did this. So that's just another Garuda pastime. And then one time Krishna, he was herding the cowherd boys, and somebody please tell me when it gets like 1:15. I can't see that clock up there, but I don't want to run over time. It's 6 o'clock, okay. So one time Krishna, he was herding the cows, and a messenger came to him and said that the gopis are getting water pots at the Yamuna. And so Krishna, he made an excuse, I need to go see if I can find some cows that strayed away. And so he walked up to the gopis, and they were putting, if you've been to India, you see how they carry those pots. It's amazing to see how they carry those pots. So they were carrying them, and Krishna was saying, he said, wow, they saw Krishna, and they said, Krishna, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I just came to find my cows. And they said, well, there's no cows here, so why are you here? And he said, well, I just thought it was amazing to see how you carry those pots. And they said, how would you know what it's like to try to carry anything? You're a king, you're the son of a king. You probably never carried anything heavy. And Krishna said, what are you talking about? He said, I carry the earth. I carried the earth one time. And they all started laughing and saying, Krishna, how do you carry the earth? And he said, in my form as Lord Varaha, I carried the earth. And they said, yeah, we're not going to believe that unless you show us. And so all of a sudden, Krishna turns himself into Varaha, but it's like about this big. And they're all looking down at Varaha, and all of a sudden he starts to get bigger and bigger. And then he goes all the way almost like up into the clouds, and they're all going, wow. And on his tusk was the earth, and the earth's rotating. And the gopis see themselves in the earth, but they also see themselves standing there. So they're like totally mystified. And Krishna is just kind of looking like, okay, does that satisfy you? And then one of them said, well, how do we know this is Krishna? So what does Krishna do? He turns blue. So Varaha turned blue. And so then they go, well, yeah, this must be Krishna. And then all of a sudden, boom, he disappears. And so they're going, wow, where did he go? What happened? Was that really Krishna? And then they go over and they look at his footprints, and they see the hoof prints, and then they see Krishna's footprints. And so they're thinking, well, what happened? And so they're walking along, and all of a sudden they come past Krishna, the cowherd boys, and Krishna just kind of looks over at them and smiles like, yeah, see, I showed you. And then another time he and Balaram he was going to pick one side and Balaram was going to pick the other side because they loved to wrestle. Wrestling was their favorite thing to do. So the boys, they were chatting each other, and they were talking about how weak Krishna was. Sri Ram said, Krishna, you can't even carry your own lunch. I have to carry your lunch for you. So you're so weak. How are you going to beat any of us in wrestling? And so they just start chatting Krishna so much that he gets embarrassed, and so he thinks, okay, I'm going to show these boys. And so immediately he turns himself into Lord Varaha again. This is another Lord Varaha pastime. And so when he does, he like roots up trees and starts throwing earth around, and the boys are like, just actually scared because Krishna, they're thinking, where's Krishna? We got to take shelter of Krishna. And so Krishna is there as the Lord Varaha. So they all offer their obeisances, and they're saying prayers, please protect us, Krishna. And so Krishna's looking around, he thinks, okay, I think probably I convinced them now that I'm pretty much powerful, and I could be a good wrestler. And so he turns himself back into Krishna. And when he does, the boys, they go running over there, and they put their arms around him. They're saying, wow, that was amazing, Krishna. They're not thinking he's the supreme person. They're not thinking anything like that. They're just thinking, this is Krishna. We love Krishna because he's just Krishna, And so they're all hugging him and saying how amazing it was. And Sridham comes up, and he puts his arm around him. He says, Krishna, that was really amazing, but I can still beat you in wrestling. So they still feel like they can, and they can. And a lot of times they still beat Krishna in wrestling matches. Okay, another pastime. This is, I told this one in the past, and but it's really a nice one to hear. So one time Mother Yashoda was, the boys were playing, and sometimes they get so involved in playing that they really wouldn't want to come home for lunch. And so she sends Mother Rohini out to get them, and she says, Balaram, Krishna, boys, come. And they didn't pay any attention to her. So then Mother Yashoda goes herself. And so she says, Krishna, Balaram, come, it's time for lunch. And they're like all dirty, and they've been playing, and they play in a game called Koi Koi. Did you ever play that game? It's like tag. I think it's like a tag. Koi Koi, yeah. And so they're just so involved in this game that they don't pay any attention to Mother Yashoda. So this is kind of like the Damodar pastime. You remember Mother Yashoda's chasing Krishna, but she could catch Krishna then because he was younger. But this time she started chasing Krishna. All the boys are all laughing, and Krishna's so fast she can't catch him. And so finally he hides behind a bush, and she loses him. She doesn't know where he is. So she thinks, what am I going to do? I got to do something here. So she all of a sudden screams, and she says, oh my God, the how are here. Run, it's the how. And so all the boys, she grabs Krishna and Balaram, they start running, and all the boys, they just think, well, what's going on? Then they're all running, and Mother Yashoda's just, come run, faster, they're after us. And so they run all the way through the gate and into the inner gate. And so the boys are really scared. And so like after that, for a few days, they don't even want to go outside the gate. So then they go later on, they're at the Yamuna, and Mother Yashoda is sitting there, and Krishna comes up and he sits in her lap, and he says, Mother, what is a how anyway? And she said, it's like a big dog. It has a tail, has like really big teeth, has red eyes, and fire comes out of its mouth. And Krishna said, wow, are they going to come after us again? And she said, that's just a tale, a story that mothers make up to scare their kids sometimes. She said, there's really no such thing as a how. And Krishna said, no, 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 you said there was, so there has to be how. He could not believe, or he couldn't take it that his mother might have not told the truth, So he said, no, no, there's how for sure. And she said, no, Krishna, I'm telling you, I just made that story up to get you boys to come. And so Krishna is thinking, okay, I'm not going to let my mother be known as someone that maybe didn't tell the truth one time. So he looks over in the bushes, and all of a sudden these 4 howls come running out. And just like Mother Yashoda described, fire coming out, red eyes. And so Krishna says, look, Mother, how? And so Mother Yashoda looks over, and then she looks back, and then she looks again, and she thinks, oh my God, that is how. So she grabs Krishna and Balaram and the boys. She's saying, run, run. And so they're running, and then Krishna looks at Balaram, and they're smiling, and he's saying, Mother, they're getting closer, they're getting closer. And sure enough, they were getting closer and closer. And as soon as they got like within an arm's length, well, Krishna turned and looked at them, and they froze. They became stone. And so Mother Yashoda runs into through this gate, and she tells the guards close the gate. And then Krishna is trying to tell her. It kind of backfires on Krishna, because after that she wouldn't let him go out and play, so they couldn't go. So his own tale kind of backfired on him. But he finally convinced her when they took her out, and they show, and it says that these stone statues, are actually still there. I don't know if anybody has seen them, but maybe Mother Prabhupada Priya. No, but it says that actually you can see these how that Krishna turned into stone. Okay, one more, maybe 1 or 2 more. Okay, so once Krishna was supposed to meet Srimati Radharani at a certain place at a certain time, and he got there right on time, but Srimati Radharani was late. And so Krishna said, well, it's a woman's prerogative to be late. And I'm thinking, any husband that's ever waited on his wife when you're sitting in the car thinking, okay, she's going to come any minute. I think Srimati Radharani Krishna handed this prerogative down to all women that, okay, it's okay to be late. So anyway, he was waiting, and then 5 minutes went by, 15 minutes, and then Krishna started to worry because he's thinking, well, she's still not here. So he knows that Kamsa knows about Srimati Radharani. He knows about her beauty and that he really wants to kidnap her. So he's thinking, well, I better go check. So he starts walking down the path, and he's walking along, and all of a sudden in the forest he hears this voice, and this voice is saying, Ratna Gopura, where are you? Ratna Gopura. And he's saying, that's Srimati Radharani's voice. So he goes walking into the woods, and Srimati Radharani, she's so intent on looking down that she comes up on, and all of a sudden there's 2 blue lotus feet there. And she looks up, and there's Krishna standing there. And she says, oh, my Lord, I'm so glad you're here. And he's saying, what are you looking for? Why were you late? And she's saying, well, I lost my favorite anklet. And he said, well, you've got tons of anklets. Well, let's go. He wanted to be with Srimati Radharani. And he was losing time because at noon, they had to both go their separate ways back to their home. So he told her, you got lots of anklets. She said, no, that you made this one especially for me. It was so beautiful. It's my favorite anklet. We have to find it. And so Krishna says, no, let's find it later. And she looks at him, and she gives him this stare, and he knows, I don't push it anymore, because I know I don't want to make her mad. And so he says, okay, let's look together. So he takes her by the hand, and they're walking through the forest looking. And then she tells Krishna, why don't you go over here, and I'll go over here. And she had one maidservant with her, and she was looking also. And so they're looking, and Krishna's thinking, well, I'm losing time here. I got to do something. So he sees this beautiful vine, and he takes this vine, and he makes it into this really beautiful anklet. And he calls Radharani. He says, come over. I have an anklet. So she's thinking he found the one that she lost. So she runs over there, and Krishna says, look, I made this for you. And she said, if you want to waste time playing with vines, you can waste time, but I'm finding my anklet. And she says, I'm not going anywhere until I find it. And so he realizes, well, we got to find this anklet. So he's running out of time and patience, and so he's thinking, what can I do? So what he does, he takes his flute, and he stabs his flute into the ground, and he says, Mother Earth, please find Radharani's anklet for me. And all of a sudden, out of the ground, all these beautiful anklets. The first one that came out was exactly the one that Radharani had lost. And then other ones kept coming out. And so there's more and more anklets kept coming out. And one was more beautiful than the next. And so Krishna calls Srimati Radharani over, and he says, come look, I found your anklet. So she comes over, and she looks down, and she can't believe that all these anklets are coming out. And he picks out the one that's just like for her, and he says, here, I found your anklet. And she says, well, you better put it on before the whole forest fills up with anklets, because anklets are just coming everywhere. And so Krishna's thinking, wow, he's jumping at the chance that she holds her foot out, and he actually gets to put the anklet back on her foot. And so he does that, and then they get to spend like the rest of whatever time is left together, and then at noon they part. So it says today that if you really, truly have faith in Krishna, Radha and Krishna, that there's a possibility you could go there and you could find one of those anklets. So I was thinking, me go there with a shovel or something and start digging, But you have to have faith first. How much time we've got left? (6:13). Okay. One more. There's one. Okay, I'll give you a choice. There's one where he wrestles with the gopis. It's kind of a long one. And there's one where he plays hide and seek with the gopis. Which one do you want to hear? Wrestling? Wrestling. Okay. So Krishna has, he's experienced so many rasas, but he's never experienced the Madhurya rasa in wrestling, because usually he's wrestling the cowherd boys. So one day he's sitting under a tree, and he's playing his flute, and he plays his flute to call Srimati Radharani, because he can play it in a way that only her and the gopis hear it. So she hears it, and her and the gopis come to where he is, and he's sitting under this tree. And in this tree, there's like hundreds and hundreds of green parrots. And there's so many parrots, the whole tree just looks green. And the amazing thing is that you know how when parrots, they squawk all the time, especially if there was a bunch of them. But they were not making one peep. They were totally immersed in Krishna's flute playing. And Srimati Radharani turns to Lalita and she says, look how these parrots are so immersed in Krishna's flute playing. And so about that time, Krishna realizes that Radharani and the gopis have come. And so he stops playing. And when he stops playing, the parrots wake up, and then they all fly off. And so Srimati Radharani walks up and she says, Krishna, what is this? What is this area here? And he said, well, this is where the cowherd boys and I come to play. And there was like a chin-up bar, there was a tree house, there was a swing that went over the Yamuna. They had all kinds of things to play with. And so she points over and she says, what is this clay area here? And Krishna says, well, that's where the boys and I wrestle. That's where we do hand-to-hand combat. And she says, well, Radharani says, well, do you ever win? And Krishna thought, what are you talking about? I'm the son of a king. He says, I always win. And she said, well, that's not what Sridham said. She said, Sridham says you lose, and you're a bad sport about it every time you lose. You always sulk and you're a bad sport. And he says, yeah, Sridham would say that. But he says, this is our arena. And she says, he said, well, she said, what is this house over here for? And he said, well, that's where we change into our wrestling costumes. And they say, well, Krishna, can we see your wrestling costume? And he says, no. He says, we only put our wrestling costume on when we're challenged by someone. And they say, well, if someone challenged you, would you put your wrestling outfit on? And he said, of course, I'll never turn down a challenge. I'm not a Kshatriya, but he's the son of a king, so he never turns down a challenge. So Lalita says, okay, Krishna, we challenge you. We challenge you to wrestle Radharani. And so Krishna, wow, he's like, this ecstatic rush came over him, thinking that he was going to actually wrestle Radharani, but he's a man. He says, no, that wouldn't be fair. I'm a man. She's a woman. She's not used to wrestling. She's the weaker. I know women don't think so much that today, but she's a weaker sex, as far as, so it wouldn't be fair for me to wrestle her. But all the time in his heart, he really wanted to wrestle her. And they said, well, what if word gets out that you turned down a challenge of a woman? You wouldn't even, you weren't, you were afraid to wrestle with a woman. So Krishna thinks about it and he says, okay, so be it, let's wrestle. So then Krishna goes into his changing room, and the gopis go in the forest and they pull their saris up and they kind of put their sashes on. And so Krishna comes out and he looks beautiful in his wrestling outfit. And so they say, well, how does this work? And Krishna says, well, okay, there's 3 forms of wrestling. There's 4 forms of wrestling. He said there's the Hanumanji, there's the Bhishma Sen, there's Jambavati, and there's Jarasandha. And he said, we usually do the Hanumanji. And he said, but we won't do that. We'll just do pastime wrestling. And they said, what is pastime wrestling? He said, well, it's just we're boys and we kind of play around like we're wrestling and everything because I don't want to, hurt anybody. And they said, well, what do you do in your pastime wrestling? He said, well, usually I'll maybe knee them with my knee, or I'll strangle them, or I'll take them and throw them on down. And the gopis are going, they look at Lalita and they say, what did you get us into? We're going to have to. And so Krishna says, okay, he said, let's get started. So he puts his hands on his knees and he's ready to wrestle. And the gopis, they're trying to push, one is trying to push the other out. You go first. No, you go first, And so no one wants to go first. And so finally, Lalita says, okay, let's rush him. And so they all rush Krishna. And so then Krishna does something amazing. He turns himself, what's the word? He changes it. For every gopi, there's a Krishna. So he expands. That's what I was looking for. Sorry. He expands himself into every gopi that's there has a Krishna wrestling them. And so gradually he's defeating the different gopis, and then he comes back into one Krishna. And so they get him down. They actually get Krishna down on the ground. One of them sitting on his chest, the other one's holding his arms, and the other one's holding his legs. And so all of a sudden Krishna disappears. And they're thinking, where did he go? And all of a sudden he's behind them. And so he starts wrestling again. Then it gets down to where it's just, I'm going to shorten this a little bit because we're running out of time, but it's just him and Srimati Radharani wrestling. And so the more Krishna touches Radharani, the weaker he actually gets, and the more Radharani touches Krishna, the stronger she gets. So the gopis really aren't taking sides until they see that Srimati Radharani is actually probably going to win. And so they start chanting, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe, Jai Radhe. And then the animals join in. The animals start chanting also, Jai Radhe. And so they're all chanting Jai Radhe. And so then Radharani, she pins Krishna down, and she has his arms pinned, and she's sitting on his chest, and Krishna's in total bliss. I mean, he didn't consider this losing at all. He considered, hey, I'm the winner here too, So he finally says, how they pat and say, I give, you win, And then everybody cheers, and it says that just by hearing this story of this wrestling match, that because Cupid was watching also, and because Cupid was so absorbed in this wrestling match, that if you hear this pastime, that you won't be agitated by Cupid anymore. So, Jai Haribol. So, anyway, that's just some of the pastimes. There's many, many, many more. And I'm sure Mother Prabhupada Priya will have many more to tell tomorrow night. So, thank you so much. Jai. Shri Janmashtami ki jai. Mother Prabhupada ki jai. 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 Thank you. Jai.